3, 4, 5. We're on now? Yeah. Wow, who knows? It must be Thursday, it must be 5, because we're live, and this is Frankly Speaking, where truth is our mission, really our realm, said as we see it, and frankly as well. Hi, I'm Joe Spina, along with the Honorable Paul Crowley. How are you,
So
Paul?
I'm only honorable when Darren's not here? Is that how it works?
Darren's not here.
Yeah.
No, he has a problem with his family, and we wish everything well. It works out well there.
Yep.
Yeah, but he may be back next week. If not, it's you and I, babe.
Yeah.
We're going to get to Frankly.
We'll manage without him.
Okay, we can work it out.
Yep.
Frankly, Joe, humility, by definition, is freedom from pride and arrogance. It's a term most often used when describing Pete Pedro. And you know Pete quite well. You know him.
I know Peter very well, yeah.
A while back, and you remember this, Paul, you and I did a show called, segments called Lynn's Legends, and we featured Pistol Pete Pedro as one of the legends, and you have to say he certainly was a legend.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Here's what Frankly Speaking said in that segment. Let's see if you remember this. It said, Pistol Pete, a moniker given to him by Red Hoffman, who was one of the great sports writers, as opposed to the current guy who runs the place. Former executive sports editor of the item back in the 50s, Pedro is unquestionably a Lynn legend. Considered one of Lynn's all-time top 10 athletes, from Lynn Tech to West Texas to New England Patriots to Toronto Argonauts, he left his mark. But more importantly, is Pistol Pete the man, the husband, the father, the grandfather, and the educator. He was, and continued to be, a positive role model for hordes of Lynn's youngsters. He was a mentor to many. Frank Carey can attest to that. And everyone who knew Pistol Pete can attest to that. Our condolences to the Pedro family.
Absolutely.
Paul, you're very active in the Alumni Association at Tech, and he's one of the charter members of the Golden Club down there, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he was, I can't say exactly when, but he was probably in the first Hall of Fame class.
From Tech?
From Tech, yes.
You know, people don't realize he was undersized.
Oh, he was tiny, you know, and to think that what he was able to do, I mean, it's not easy.
They weren't going to give him a scholarship because he was undersized until they did one thing. They told him to come in, and they said, let's see. And the way he followed and hit the holes, and he made a couple of 70-yard runs, and that was the end of it.
I'd like to say two things about Pete. Not really, I guess the first one would be because of his legend as an athlete. I remember when I was, I don't know, maybe 11 or 12 years old, going to the YMCA when it was back on Market Street. And I got such a thrill when he walked through the room. I mean, really, 11 or 12 years old, it was such a thrill that Pete Pedro was in the room. You know, that was like right after his Patriots days. And the other one, and this one is near and dear to me, because my daughter was in a program over at the Fentanyl area school when she was in the 10th grade. He took her under a wing, and he helped out a lot. And
he was a great mentor.
Oh, he was
great mentor.
He was awesome.
Pedro, can we throw up a picture of number 21 in his heyday? Look at him. I mean, what a smile, what a life, what a man. You know, and that smile, notice it all those years in between. You see any difference in that smile?
No, not a bit.
That's right.
No.
He was, this is not my quote. These are from Tony Nicosia, from Tommy Arabino, and Frankie Carey. You know, those four musketeers would take off every year to go to the New York to the basketball playoffs or whatever, the football. Very close friends.
So, and I just add one other thing, and that is that one of my neighbors over in Veterans Village is his son Peter, and I've gotten to know him over the years, playing basketball with him and so forth, and actually doing a little business with him back in the day. And classy kid. And you can tell that he was brought up very well, and you know that's a testament to Pistol Pete and his wife, and you know.
Well, you know, Pistol didn't realize this. He was an adult when he found out that he was a juvenile diabetic.
Is that right?
He went years without knowing it. I mean, ultimately, one of the reasons why, and you know, it's fortunate that he held up as well as he did, given his condition,
right.
And it affected his eyesight. You know. He never complained. The guy never complained. Folks, I'm going to apologize. Last week we gave you some questions. We never gave you the answers. So, Paul, I'm going to hit you with them. All right? We're going to test your memory. What is the only continent that covers 4 hemispheres?
Africa.
Very good. In land area, what is the smallest country in the world?
The Vatican.
The Vatican. Hey, 2 for 2. You're sharp today.
Well, Darren told me them all last week, so.
Yeah, well, I told them to him. What country spans 11 time zones? It can be 7 a.m. in one time zone and 6 p.m. in the other.
Russia?
Very good. Canada, folks, has 35.85, you might round it off, 36 million people. And one state in the United States has 39 million people. What state would that be?
California?
Exactly. How many stripes on the American flag?
13. 7 red,
Representing?
1 and 6 white, representing the 13 original colonies.
Folks, you see this? You see why he's on here? You understand why Paul is called the Honorable by me? He's also brilliant. And you're a tech guy.
A tech guy, yeah. But they taught us history, too.
You did?
Yep.
In between hammers and nails?
And the original flag only had 13 stars, too, in a circle.
You know, you are sharp. It was circular, huh? Mm. Name 4 seas named after colors.
Caucasian.
Meaning the White Sea. The non-White Sea. The opposite of white.
Black.
The Black Sea.
Oh, right. Yeah, the Red Sea.
Yeah, one other. Between China.
Yellow.
That's
Yellow
it.
Sea, yeah.
Folks, he's on to it. And lastly, 6 capitals that begin with S.
Springfield.
Illinois.
What's the one in California? It's Sacramento.
2. Sacramento, California. Utah.
Salt Lake City.
Oregon.
Salem.
Very good. That's 4. 2 to go, and you're a winner. New Mexico.
Santa Fe.
And Minnesota.
St. Paul.
Bingo. On to addiction.
I'm pretty good if you give me the easiest hints of all, you know, right?
You're good
All I
regardless,
need is the hints.
Don't have a low self-esteem here.
I don't.
To addiction, folks. At issue, Lynn's opioid epidemic. Tuesday, Paul, next Tuesday, 6 p.m. at City Hall in the chamber. They're going to have a public hearing, I suspect. It's going to be moderated by newly elected Councilor Lodge Brian Field. Now, these are the stats. And by the way, I want to thank Lieutenant Michael Kimmick because he's the guy who correlates all of this stuff. Okay. Now, watch this here, Paul. As of March of this year, there were 89 ODs and 13 deaths. Last year, there were 499 ODs and 68 deaths. That's better than 1 a day.
Yep.
In 2016, it was 144.50. 15, 348, 50. 14, 290.46. Now take a look at 13. 195.24. It's really spiking.
It really is.
You know?
And so that's probably through March. So if you multiply that by 4, you're talking that it'll be
slightly lower.
Down.
Yeah, slightly.
And you can probably attribute that mostly to the efforts to provide Narcan to enough people so that they're stopping it before it happens. You know, because it's amazing, this Narcan, because first of all, some people think that they're afraid to dispense it because they're afraid it might do something wrong. But even if you don't have you're not ODing and you get it, it can't harm you. So all it can do is save you. So there's no downside to it. So
that's interesting. Remember in Pulp Fiction, there was a scene there in which she was ODing, and I think that's what they injected her or whatever.
Right. Yeah, something like that. And by the way, through the Lynn Community Health Center a few years ago, one of the doctors over there, he started a champion program where he was going around to all of the agencies to develop champions within the agencies. And we have one in our organization. It's Stacy Mancello, who works in the senior center. And their job is to educate and provide Narcan to people in the organization so that we're more and more ready to deal with it when it happens.
I want to get to a quote, and if we can put this up, Pedro, with the opioids, by Brian Field, and he's going to have a whole bunch of people. It's like a panel, and they will try to answer all these different questions. It's kind of an educational thing. And I'm really not a big fan of governance by committee. I think it gets bogged down. Everybody has a special interest, and you end up blocking each other out. But here's a quote from Councilor Field. It goes, "If someone has an addiction, they won't be labeled as a criminal or a junkie, which is going to help the overall fight against opioids." So I have there if we can get the other one up there, Pedro, I have the word in bold, empathy. You know, I'm not sure you can solve addictions with empathy. And our number here is 781-780-946. I'd love to have you people pine in on this. I have an addictive personality. I smoked for many years. I like wager. Yeah, I like to wager here and there. I never drank that much, but so I'm not without vice and without sin. But what I noticed is that if you're understanding, you empower. The hardest thing in the world to say to a kid is no. I had a hard time saying it to my grandkids and my children. But it's the best thing you can say most of the time.
Right.
So I don't know whether we should look at it as, we're not going to, if a person is over the line, that person's a junkie.
Right. Well, so a couple things. The idea of reducing stigma, I think, is a noble idea, because if you can reduce stigma, then there's an opportunity. Then society will give them a chance at redemption where maybe they won't otherwise.
But it has to be earned, Paul. I don't have a problem. I think when you remove stigma, sometimes you're making excuses.
Okay, look, I get it. I mean, look, I'm, as you know, I'm a recovering alcoholic.
I know that.
And I state it freely, and because I am not currently,
drinking,
in trouble because of it.
Right.
The stigma isn't so much, but stigma nonetheless. But the thing is, part of the reason why I'm open about it is I want people to understand that it's not a bad thing, and it isn't a moral.
That's a different issue, Paul. To recognize that a person is in the process of doing something and bettering their life, as you did, and all the credit in the world to you. You're not the only one. Almost, and you know this because you're a friend of mine over and above everything else, and you've traveled in the same company I do, and you know a great deal of my friends, much older than you, are all in AA.
Right.
And so, and they're wonderful people. They've done something with their life. They don't look at themselves as being, they weren't criminals, number one, and they recognized that they had to turn it around, that they were doing no good to their family and to themselves. So that's the point I'm trying to make.
So can I just add one other thing, and that is like the opioid epidemic involves, obviously it's opioids, but like heroin and OxyContin.
Yeah.
These are very difficult substances to overcome, more so than alcohol, in my view.
I agree, but we're going to get. Well, let me throw one thing up here because I want you to discuss this, because you were involved in it. Would you throw up the an opiate epidemic, and does this make sense? And take a look at this. Why are we legalizing marijuana? Because I don't care what anybody tells me. Marijuana is a gateway to these other drugs, and as much as they want to deny it, they're blowing smoke. It's a real tough one. I mean, that was a referendum, and it was passed by the majority. And then they wonder why they have a problem.
Right.
Well, isn't there an insanity? Right. And we're going to have 6 dispensaries. We have 2 already, but that's for medical. I don't have a problem with that. But we're going to have recreational marijuana, 6 of them, right? As of July 1st.
Plus the 2 medicals, yeah.
That's 8 in total. We have someone on a call? Or?
So can I just...
to break? Okay.
We have to take a break?
Not yet.
Okay, because I'd just like to say that while I think that your point is valid, Brian's point is valid too, it's kind of trying to figure out a happy balance between the attitude that says, it can't be a moral issue and you have to cut them some slack. And the other side of it is you have to put some responsibility on them as well. It needs to be a balancing act. We need to help them, but they need to help themselves.
But we're out of balance, Paul, when you have 68 fatalities and your trend line is going this way.
Right. So here's how I would see fixing it, and I don't think it costs any money. It might actually save the system money. So if you think about the cost in dollars to the state of Massachusetts, for example, and for the locals, for the policing and so forth, to deal in the courts, to deal with, somebody who has a heroin addiction, shoplifting or armed robbery or doing these things, or stealing from their family, doing all that kind of stuff, all that type of stuff, which leads them into the courts. They, get put in jail for so many days, they get kicked out, and they go back and they just keep repeating it, right? That system is, if you just think about the cost of that to the state.
But it costs because of the person's addiction. It's the cost that should not be borne by society.
No, but see, my theory is that the reason why it's so costly is because they're not taking care of the individual. They say we don't have enough beds for them. We can't give them the.
Well, wait a minute. We're going to take a hard break, and we'll get back to the subject. Stay tuned.
350 million people worldwide suffer from depression. While this may come as a shock, what many people don't seem to realize is that depression comes in various forms and is experienced differently in everyone. There is one death by suicide every 12.3 minutes, and 2 out of 3 people with depression do not actively seek nor receive proper treatment. So let's change that. You are not alone. Seek help today.
Once you shoot your first needle, you become feeble. Your body begins to ache and deteriorate. If you don't seek help fast, your inner voice will wheedle you into doing worse than that.
And we're back. That was a long and. Yeah. Just before the break, Paul, you were talking about the balance that's necessary.
So if you were to eliminate the cost, if it didn't cost anything for the policing, the criminal proceedings in court, the incarceration, and the cycle of that, if you could eliminate that cost entirely, I would say that the cost to take those individuals who, let's say, find themselves into the system, and instead of arresting them for the crime that they committed to feed their habit,
shoplifting,
and move them into a facility that is dedicated towards not just getting them clean, but giving them the education that they need. If you do that, I think you can replace all of that bad cycle of recidivism and replace it with a good, sensible approach to giving them
But it's
help.
not happening, Paul. The figures, everything's
But why-
going this way.
but why
I'll tell you
isn't it
why.
happening?
I'll tell you exactly why. Because fentanyl, which is the killer, that's the one that's doing the damage, is coming into this country in reckless abandon, right, through Mexico, and nobody wants to shut the border down, particularly our local politicians, shut the border down, stop the flow or abate the flow of fentanyl coming from China, by the way, and there is no regulation as to its potency.
Right.
And
Okay.
that's the problem. And
Okay.
nobody wants to talk about the hard stuff.
That's a different problem in my.
No, it isn't. That's why we have an opioid
No, but
epidemic.
I agree. But the fact of the matter is, if it's just heroin and it's not mixed with fentanyl, and you get addicted, you do the same things. You steal to support your habit. You get arrested. You find yourself in front of the judge. You go in. You spend 30, 60, 90 days under the care and custody of the sheriff. I mean, and then you get out, and then you just keep repeating it.
But if you stigmatize it, isn't that somehow a deterrent? I mean, to take away the stigma, isn't that taking away a deterrent?
Well, so I'd like to just stipulate that on the one hand, you want to try to address the stigma. At the same time, you want to make sure that you continue to reinforce the need for the individual to take responsibility for their actions.
No question.
You can do both, I think.
What is the rate of folks, I mean, what percentage of people who are alcoholics are able to become sober? They're always alcoholics, but how many
It's a
remain
small percentage.
Huh?
It's a small percentage.
That remain sober?
Yes.
Really? Is it the
And
is
by,
it
by the
greater
way,
in-
I'm still at risk of.
I realize that, but what about? But you're not. What I'm saying
yet.
is, once a person is been addicted to whatever the addiction is, right? They're always subject to that addiction.
I substitute addictions.
Don't we all?
I mean, work, smoking cigars.
What?
you know.
But Paul, but that's legitimate. It's when someone recognizes a problem that they have, and whatever device they use not to have that problem surface, that's a good thing.
I get it. Yeah.
You know, and so pat yourself on the back for being able to overcome something that's not easy to overcome.
But here's the thing: there's an education component to this that I think that's important to note, and I'm just going to tell you just a quick anecdote about a situation that helped me lose weight, or a comment that was made to me that helped me lose weight. You know how marketing on commercials and stuff like that is all designed to get you to buy the product, right? And they use psychology to try to talk you into it. Somebody said to me, "Nobody can eat just one." What's that commercial? Nobody can eat just one. Lay's potato chips, right?
Okay.
And as a result, it has been ingrained in our thought process. So whenever we open up a bag of chips, we eat more than one, and we just keep
And
eating
we keep
them.
going with it, right? Yeah.
If you recognize that you can't eat just one, and you realize that it's just a matter of you telling yourself that, the effect that you can take on yourself is unbelievable. I went from eating a half a jar of peanuts when I got home at the end of the day, which was over 1,000 calories, to just eating a handful.
Paul,
it matters. I mean, to understand.
Let me date myself, folks. There was a place on Lower Union Street called Harold's. It was a deli. And he advertised, the pastrami, hot pastrami sandwich. One was not enough, two was too much. So he sold you 1.5, which is basically what you're saying.
Right.
It was a great marketing point.
Right.
And folks, I agree with you. Instead of having the whole pizza, have half the pizza.
Right. And I think that, it's a lot easier to deal with a bag of chips than it is with a needle of heroin in your arm. I would say that.
Paul, why are people doing it to start with? I mean, if you want to talk about education, you're in a preventive. You do a lot of preventive work in the agency that you're at, and preventive medicine is a good thing. So the problem doesn't happen if you prevent it from happening.
Right.
So here's where I have a problem. This is why I threw up the insanity of opening up 6 marijuana parlors, which is taking away the stigma of drug use. It's saying, oh, it's okay. It's fine recreationally to do drugs. That's what it's saying, in effect. So why would someone not want to smoke, do some coke or whatever? I mean, we had 3 out of 4 of our last presidents. We're addicted to either drugs or alcohol, right? 3 out of 4. I mean,
Addicted
Donald Trump
or
doesn't do drugs at all because of his brother, who died a junkie, correct? Or an alcoholic.
Alcoholic, I think it was, yeah.
So, what can I tell you? Let's get an urban update here on this medical village, Paul, because I remember you running up there and listening to all those board meetings about Save Union Hospital. That didn't happen. So, here's the update. They needed to amend this Tuesday. I don't know if they did or not. Maybe you can update me on that. They need to amend zoning in order to allow the medical village to be built or open this fall. Is that correct? Did they do it?
I think that's an easy step.
But did they do it? Do you know where they did it? They didn't.
I think that all they would have done is set it down for public hearing. But
so it's supposed to open up this fall, meaning September, October, and November, right?
That sounds right. Yeah.
Now here's what this medical village is all about. It's what it will provide. 1, urgent care. This is the update. Urgent care, basic lab radiology, outpatient psychiatry, which is going to get everybody up in arms, by the way, that one there. That's what they try to avoid doing, if you remember correctly, right? The outpatient psychiatry part of it. So they kind of buried this down. And the 4th thing they're going to do is they're going to expand home for the Home for the North Shore physicians, both primary and secondary care. But there are unresolved disputes still to be handled, of which how much land is left over
And what to do with it.
And what do you do with it?
Right.
So the city is saying that there's only 1/3 left over, and the other guys are saying, no, we're only taking 20% of 20 acres. So there's 15 acres left over. The city says, no, that's not true. And they're trying to figure out the price tag and zoning and this and that and the rest of it.
So, I mean, the property belongs to North Shore Medical Center / Partners.
That's right.
So what is the city saying? That they're going to take the land? And
I don't see how the city can take it. Can they take it?
No, I don't know. It sounded like what you were saying is that the city is focusing on what to do with the land. How are they going to acquire the land? I mean, they don't own it.
Yeah, and yet Losey got Partners to agree to do a $30,000 study as to what the best use of the land would be. Would it be mixed housing with mixed commercial, small shops?
So ultimately, the decision, the study would guide them towards a decision about how best to use the land, and then
called the master plan. You've heard of those things.
And then Partners would sell the land to a developer.
Have you ever noticed these master plans are not so masterful? Have you ever noticed that?
Well, I'll tell you what. In the 6 years that I was on the city council and all the years since then, I've been a lot of studies commissioned. Not a lot of results from them.
That's what I'm saying.
I think it tends to be a waste of money, in my view.
Which is going to bring us to this. If you could, Pedro, we have this beautiful seascape. It's called back then it was called Moving Forward. If we can get that one up there. And there it is. Now it's maybe next year. And that's the Chevy site, right? Now let's get to Long Winding Road, if we could. And this is Chapter 91, and this is a law from 1866. That was right after the Civil War, folks. It regulates coastal activities. And you're on that board, aren't you, Paul? On coastal activities?
We don't
you
do
don't sit on this one here?
We don't regulate anything.
Anyways, this law, Commonwealth of Massachusetts, says it guarantees the waterfront belongs to the public, and that private use of waterways must serve the public purpose.
Right. By the way, there was when I read that article, there was a statement that part of the development of the Chevy site, as you put it, the Beacon site, was to build a boardwalk from, I think they said, from Seaport Landing to the clock tower. But they really, I mean, and I suppose that's accurate, but it's all the way to the ferry, and I think that matters. I mean, the fact that it's going to connect the ferry to Seaport Landing is huge.
That's just a couple of miles, isn't it?
No, it's not that far. But my point is that in the context of the intent behind the law was to make the shoreline for the benefit of the public. You want to connect it all, and probably the single most, other than like the yacht clubs further down towards Nahant, the ferry is a key gathering point for people who going to the water's edge, right?
Let me ask you this.
So you want to be able to get in there and then move up and down.
All right. I mean, the reason why I said a mile or two is because I was actually thinking about the whole bend from the yacht club, Port Old Pub, all the way around. And fundamentally, that's what they're saying. Now, I want to ask you a question. And folks, I don't know if you can answer out here, 781-780-9460. But if you read that law, that means if you own a house on the water, that land in front of you is not yours. The public can use it, go right through your house. Is that what it means?
I'm not sure if it actually means that. What I would say
it's certainly ambiguous enough for it to be a lawsuit.
Well, what it's basically saying is if you want to develop your waterfront property,
you don't own it.
You need to share it with the community.
With the public, exactly.
Yeah. But it's
so
still
anybody
yours.
wants to camp out in front of your house, right?
But it's still yours. I mean, I don't think it's going to be. It's. I mean, I would wonder. Let's go forward a year and a half, 2 years, and the project is complete, right? And you got okay. Let's just assume, for the sake of this discussion, that there is a boardwalk that's about 15 feet wide, and it runs from the ferry all the way down to Seaport Landing. And people can go there, and they can walk, and they can catch the breeze, they can catch some sun, they can sit on a bench. Who's responsible for clearing it in a snowstorm?
It's got to be the state. Should be the state. MDC. That's what I would think. We got to go to a break. We'll be back with more about that which is supposed to be that isn't.
Welcome to Lynn Community Television, your local media center. Here, we have great resources and staff to help create your own content.
Hi, I'm Jim Carrigan, host of The American Dream. I'm also a member of Lynn Community TV, and I want to encourage everybody out there who's not a member of Lynn Community TV to join the group. We have a lot of fun down here. The studio is new and it's in fabulous condition.
Things provided to our members are state-of-the-art studio, video and audio equipment, editing space, and a full-on training session with a staff member.
I've been involved in access television for over 20 years. Our shows have gone out to tens of thousands of people in local communities and millions throughout the world. Come on down, learn how to use the equipment to promote whatever it is you're doing.
For more information, please visit our website at www.lyntv.org, give us a call, or come on down to the station at 181 Union Street in Lynn.
Oh, frankly, we're back. And we've been talking about the waterfront and developments that were supposed to happen, that haven't happened, that may happen, and could happen. 781-780-9460. So the biggest impediment seems to be the state regulations and that type of stuff that's stopping the development from being shovel-ready when it is shovel-ready. I mean, the developers want to put up the money. And here's the funny feature, and we're going to get to put up Catch-22, if you would, because this is fascinating. Apparently, there's 20 million square feet of underdeveloped real estate near Lynn's MBTA's commuter rail stations, reasonably priced for development. But here's the catch, Paul. Famous book, Catch-22. Although developers love the lower price tag of Lynn properties, investors don't. Lynn's low rents turn off investors. Advantage equals disadvantage. That's a crazy equation.
Yeah, and that's pretty well said. But let me just point out one thing, and I've mentioned this a number of times on the show when people have said, well, when are we ever going to finish, get the Lynnway developed? And the fact is, and I think that this was probably pointed out in the article about this in the paper, and that is the developer that goes first really takes the biggest risk, right? You know, they're the one that says, I think it's a good time. And people like to feel comfortable that somebody else is taking the same kind of risk. If you're deciding to do it yourself, you know, you're thinking about it. You second guess yourself. You know, is this going to work? All the possible problems that you could have, and all. So you're reticent about doing it. But when somebody else is doing it, and then all of a sudden it's starting to take shape, and the rents are strong, and
that's true. But here's the problem. You've gone over this, and you've been very eloquent about it. And I ran into two of the developers for the Chevy site. I didn't know who they were at the Charlie Baker affair down the Portal that you sponsored. And frankly, I was taken by how sincere they were about wanting to do the project, and they were just restrained from doing it. They would have done it last year.
All right. I mean, and here's the thing about that, and the fact that there are so many state agencies that are putting the kibosh on this thing by their involvement, right? Is that they just want this fixed, they want that fixed, they want this fixed. So the cost of carrying the land, the cost of carrying the option to buy the land.
Who was governor?
Charlie Baker. Let me finish.
No, he's now governor. Who was governor when all these crazy regulations went in?
I don't know, back in 1866?
No. Well, it wasn't 19... those... You didn't have to enforce those regulations, you know? You didn't have to build on top of them.
Hey,
the past administration, the Patrick administration, were regulatory happy.
Right. No, I certainly understand that. And all those issues are real. But there's one very big thing, and you point this out when you talk about, like the Trump administration being businessmen versus the Obama administration being academics, right? It's kind of the same thing. The bureaucrats don't really care or understand the time value of money and the importance of timing. For example, right now, the market is strong for real estate. Rents are going up. It's a good time to be bringing new units online, right?
Except in Lynn, Paul. I mentioned that last week. I rented in Lynn a flat.
But that's what they said in the paper. But everything I hear in the community is to the contrary.
Well, then why aren't they developing? Because the investors would pick up on that, and the investors would turn around and say, "Wow."
I don't know.
And they're not.
I drive by this development that's going on next to the Walnut Street Cafe on the Linway. It's on Walnut Street. It's that street that runs off down where the old Pepsi plant was. That street there.
Yeah.
It's a big, outcrop of granite that runs right along, and it's about 40 feet high. And they're in there. They're blowing it up. They want to level it down so that they can actually put houses on it. People are putting houses wherever they can find them. They're putting them. So
houses, single-family houses, are not the answer to our problem. We need to have concentrated high rental property so that we maximize the value of land.
So we're kind of mixing the issues a little bit, because I'm thinking about increasing the housing stock, which is
single housing stock or apartments?
Housing stock in general, places for people to live.
In the aggregate.
Right. So it is happening, and that's my point. And so the fact is, and here's, I'll give you an example of a situation where timing is everything. David Solimene did that development. He's doing that development now. It's actually in Peabody, but it's up off of.
I know it is. Yeah.
I forget the name of the street, but it's kind of
Quarry Road,
that area, right? So that's the way in, and the residents in the area opposed it vociferously. They pushed it. They were against it. And Solimene had to buy that property. It took him 10 years between when he first acquired the property till he was actually able to put a shovel in the ground. 10 years.
Yeah.
And it turned out, when he finally got the approvals, the market was strong, and he's doing as well as ever. But he had to ride it all out. But my point is, if you have it's the timing, and it really does matter when it happens.
It seems to me that the timing is not an issue with Lynn, because we've been missing the timing. Revere grabbed the timing. Peabody grabbed the timing, benefited from it. All these communities been benefit, not us. Somerville, for God's sakes, was a rat hole, and yet they boomed because of their tie-in to Boston. Here's another point. You talk about the ferry. You said word ferry. Here's the problem with ferry. Here's the problem with Blue Line. Here's the problem with all this NBA stuff that we're talking about. You don't have enough ridership, Paul. If you don't have ridership, it's a dead issue. The reason why the ferry failed is because nobody got on it. That's why, or not a sufficient amount of people got on it to make it cost effective. So why would you beat that drum, that horse, when it isn't working? Okay? It's not going to work. I think that the idea of tying it to Boston is a terrific idea. Someone mentioned to me they can go to Swampscott, jump on a train in Swampscott, be at North Station in 17 minutes.
Right.
Why aren't they using the Lynn station? You know why? Because it's uninviting.
Right.
Well, why not make Lynn inviting? And then you're there, not in 17 minutes, you're there in 14 minutes, Paul.
Right.
And if you take care of that, you're going to start booming.
Well, I agree with all these points that you're making, because I think in the aggregate, doing everything to make the downtown more inviting, to get past the regulation for the waterfront, to dealing with the opioid epidemic, all of these things in the aggregate will lift all boats type of thing. And I think that's
but why don't we just get one of them at a time? One of them at a time would be nice. We got none of them at a time. We have what we call master plans. We have more master plans you can shake a stick at. You know what I like? I like a minor plan. Forget the master plans. Let's get a minor plan going. Something small. Here's a beauty right here. Pedro, put this one up here. It's another classic. Out of nowhere. we're going to get a facelift. I need one. I don't know about you, Paul. A facelift, okay? That's a good thing. Here's a quote from the principal of Hood School. Very necessary, says Gail Dufour, principal. The school was built in 1961, and it's time. Hey, I'm older than 1961, and I certainly need a facelift, and I'm not getting one right now. So do we necessarily need a new roof on Hood School? Maybe. Do we need security doors? Maybe. Bay windows? Maybe. By the way, that's $5.8 million. Oh, but we're going to get reimbursed 4.2. Really? What about the 1.6? Where is that going, Paul?
Right.
You think the city can afford $1.6 million added to the tax base, the tax burden?
If you talk about it in the context of an operating budget that's basically running at a deficit and using a line of credit provided by the state to make things go, I would say no. Huh. But if you talk about it in the context of a capital plan, which, by the way, is required as part of getting the money from the state, was they have to develop a 5-year capital plan. So coming along and talking about, doing a $5.8 million facelift of Hood School by itself doesn't make a lot of sense. To me, what has to happen is you say, okay, we need a $5.8 million facelift of that school. What other schools need immediate work?
You want to hear the classic?
What about, do we need fire engines? Do we need police cars? Do we need dump trucks? Do we need snowplows?
Paul, you just told me about the opioid epidemic, meaning fire, police have to have this drug. They have to be aware. It affects their manpower. Okay, yeah. So there are negative effects all over the place.
But my point only is, Joe, that if you want to address whether or not doing a $5.8 million facelift of Hood School is a good idea, you can't do it because, and I'm just going to throw this out there, it's probably not what's happening, because somebody with political favor is getting it. If it's because it's needed, and it's because for example, if you listed out all of the capital improvements that the city needs, right, you're probably going to come up with a crazy number, like $100 million, right? Yeah. So what we should be talking about is, okay, how could we do that in a way where we would make capital improvements on an annual basis of, say, between $5 and $10 million, which we finance with long-term debt, which is the right way to do it, so that every year we are taking a little bit more of a step into it and getting further into the process, so that over time, every year we're looking at going back and seeing what really needs the improvement, and we're addressing it. So instead of waiting until it all blows up and we have no choice and we need $200 million now and it's an emergency.
Our bond rating went down.
It did.
That means it costs more to borrow money.
Let me tell you something. If you bring a capital plan to the bond
Moody
underwriters
yeah.
and the Moody's, and you say, here's our plan. What we're going to do is we're going to spend $10 million, because really that's all we can afford, but we're planning on doing $10 million a year over the next 10 years, and we hope to keep cycling through so that we are constantly replacing that equipment that needs to be replaced. Now the underwriters are looking at that and saying they're being smart about it. They're not doing it for political gain.
But you use the word that's difficult. You use the word hope. Hope and prayer is wonderful. Actuality is a different issue.
When did I say hope?
You said hope. You go to the bond market and hope this is what we hope to do over the next 10 years. See, hope.
But it's
hope and change.
Okay,
it doesn't work.
All right. So maybe I shouldn't use the word hope. But what I was saying it in the context of, if the underwriters approve it, this is what we would do. That's the hope. The hope is that they will approve it.
What basis do they have to accept a premise that we're going to do what we say we're going to do when we've had a master plan now on that harbor site for at least 10 years?
Well, part of what
nothing has happened.
Part of what you do is you can do a bond offering that is staggered, so the funding comes in waves. So in other words, you don't get the $100 million up front. You get $10 million every year. You know what I mean? So, and it has to be used for capital.
Well, I mean, it seems strange to me that we just got a bond issue in order to cover our deficit, and all of a sudden a facelift. I mean that's spending money before we think about it. And I'm not saying that it's necessary to have these things. It wouldn't be nice. Look, there are those who say that we need 2 new schools. That's $100 million, right. not counting manpower.
I'm not interested in spending $1 in capital improvements unless there's a legitimate, well thought through capital plan.
And on
And-
that note, we have a well-thought break to take. We'll be back.
Start a story. Adopt at theshelterpetproject.org.
Sometimes a smile can say more than words could ever express. But what if you couldn't smile? Unfortunately, that's the sad reality for so many children today. But it doesn't have to be this way. Since 1999, Smile Train has been helping children say more than words ever could with their beautiful new smile. To learn more, call or go online now.
My friend James Gandolfini and I got to know a lot of combat vets over the years, and it guts me that 22 of you are taking your own lives every day. Wounded Warrior Project is here to help. You don't have to go it alone. You hear me? You don't have to go it alone.
And we're back trying to figure out what's happening in the city of Lynn and around the nation. Let me make one point before we move forward, and this is an aside. Today, Mike Pompeo was confirmed as the Secretary of State. Now, folks, let me explain something to you about Mike Pompeo. He graduated #1 in his class at West Point.
Yep.
He graduated from Harvard Law School magna cum laude. So this guy is no dum-dum, right? He's a pretty sharp cookie.
Right.
He is outstanding as a CIA director. And I had to listen to Elizabeth Warren, otherwise known as Pocahontas, speak out as to why she could not support his nomination because he didn't represent our values. Well, Elizabeth, who wants to represent your values? That's the point. You know,
I'm not sure what her values are. She just pontificates about, you know, that she's like morally superior than everybody else because
that's what they're all about, Paul. These lefties. You know, folks, I want to explain one thing too. We get to Facebook comments. Paul, have you ever noticed that the French Revolution? You know what they had as a tool or a symbol of the French Revolution? The left, the guillotine. You ever notice that? You ever notice that all these folks from the left, they have instruments of mass destruction? They're not very nice people. You want to talk about merchants of death?
Oh, I'm
These totalitarians and hard-nosed, they don't care. In England, as we speak, the Pope, the Italian government, sent helicopters, planes to take this little kid to Italy. We'll try to do it. People want to help this, but their judge said no. Did you hear that? Watch out for that, folks. That's what's going to happen in our country if we keep going down that left-wing, crazy socialist mindset.
The worst thing we could ever do is put our fate in the hands of bureaucrats. It's the worst thing we could ever do.
But it's happening in this country, Paul. Bernie Sanders is out there talking about every man a guaranteed income. He's out of his mind.
He's out of his mind. But you know what? If the Republicans wanted to do something like say that everybody who is receiving any form of entitlement or benefit from the state because they can't do for themselves or they aren't doing for themselves, put them to work. Isn't it the Republicans would say, put them to work and we'll give them $15 an hour.
I'm going to give you
and
the
they
better
would
one.
call it a.
Well, wait a minute, I'll give you a better one. That's like the old WPA. But let me give you, or the CCC. Let me give you the best one. What you just talked about. In Britain, post-World War II, there's a report, or during the war, there's a report written, and I can't quite remember, I believe it was Beveridge, but I may be wrong, report. And it gave the tenets. It was the foundation of the welfare state because they were convinced that capitalism had failed, coming off of the two wars and the Depression.
Boom and bust.
Right.
Right.
So they turned around and they said that the state has a responsibility to support anybody who could not work. But they don't tell you the flip side of it. The flip side is as a consequence of that, you gave up your citizenship. Not only do you have to give up your citizenship, Paul, you were not allowed to reproduce. You understand what I'm talking about here?
This was in the United States?
No, this is in Britain,
Oh.
and we follow that example.
Right.
You had to became fatherless. Does anybody understand what the eugenicists were, who the eugenicists were? These are the left-wingers that wanted to perfect humankind by Margaret Sanger, abortion, Planned Parenthood. You know what the abortion is all about? Getting rid of undesirables, Paul.
Right.
Okay? Now, these folks better wake up to this stuff. This is dangerous stuff. It's been around for 150 years, but it's picking up steam. And who's fighting against all of that, Paul? The Orange Man, the one they call the Orange Man there?
Right.
The one they don't like?
Right.
That's why they're after him, because he said, hold it. I'm a nationalist. I don't believe in this stuff. This is going too far.
Right.
And it has. 2 comments. I never hear 781. 254 78 781 780 9460. And we're going to Facebook. Here, Tim Fenton, and I want to invite you on, Tim, if you ever would like to come on. Paul and I would love to have you because you say so many important things and things that have to be said. And this is about the waterfront, Paul. Why don't you read it? Can you see it? You have it in front of you? Yeah,
so
on the what? Read that out.
So Marina Bay, South Bay, Wynn Casino, Revere Beach, Pickering Wharf, Beverly, all waterfront developed properties. 2 of you stated that Revere was able to put something up so much quicker than Lynn was because it was previously developed like on amusements. The property in question here is known as Beacon. Wasn't that developed, or maybe we can change the name to Benz if my memory serves me right and take another 35 years to build. For the first time watching your show, I almost felt insulted. I'm thick-skinned and headed. Paul, myself, and a lot of other citizens of Lynn would agree on one word you used, greed.
You used that word, Paul, and you're absolutely correct. When asked about what are the difficulties that we have in the city of Lynn, it comes down to greed. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be money.
Give me an example. I'm trying to recall the context that I used the word greed.
You know, I'm trying to reconstruct it myself. But I remember, and Tim, if you can, type it up here, we'll get on the board, and you can define what you meant by greed on that. I hope you're watching. Here's the thing. Greed is not necessarily money. Greed could be that you're right, ego. Greed could be power, all right? And whose idea it is? Oh, it's my idea, not your idea, right? That's kind of greed.
Yeah.
So I think it was in the context of what you were saying is you can find that a lot of these different things that take place in government are a consequence of greed.
Yeah, and that's certainly true. And when you think about, you know, the monetary greed, you know, I think what I'm referring to is, you know, just that premise that I always say that you just got to follow the money, you know. Whenever you're trying to find out why a project is working or why it's not working, you can usually look behind. If you peel back the onion enough, you'll find, you know, somebody's beak hasn't been wet, as you like to put it. And until that happens, ever watch Billions? No. So there's this TV show, and I think it's on Showtime. It's called Billions. It's about a hedge fund guy who's always fighting with the Attorney General in New York, and it's really pretty interesting. But it gets into, you know, it's like a soap opera, but it's interesting how things get done, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah. By the way, we only have a couple of minutes left, and I want to remind you folks out here, and I think that I'm correct, you can give me a single. Tomorrow night, it will be the second night, I think this every other Friday at 6:30. If the folks in the city of Lynn want to come down here, they get some refreshments, and they get treated to a movie.
What's the movie this week?
I have no idea. Nope, it's not going to happen this week.
Wasn't it Casablanca, I think it was?
Last week it was, I wouldn't come because I was scared. Second Friday. Okay, got it. Second Friday of every month. I appreciate that. They did Psycho. And
Psycho. That's
I couldn't go there. Oh, they're going to do Flash Gordon. I love Flash Gordon. You remember that?
Yep.
The Swedish star played Ming, Dr. Ming. Von something or other. Yeah, Flash Gordon. I love that. He never made another picture.
Was that like a cereal?
Huh?
Was that a cereal?
It was a cereal with Buster Crabbe, but you
Yeah.
don't remember. It's before
No.
your time. But Flash Gordon, oh, that was great. Ming, Dr. Ming. We got a minute to go, folks. Listen, we're going to try to update you as best we can with things. We need your we need your interaction, because that only makes us better. So please get in touch with us, write to us. We'd love to have any of you invited to be guests, because after all, this is your show. It's really not our show, Paul. It's a vehicle.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's the way we look at it. Sometimes we have good ones, sometimes not so good. But overall, you got to admit, he's a pretty face. And I have wisdom. On that, bye-bye. We're flashing out of here, Paul.
That's it? That was a fast show. Fast. I thought we had one more segment.